Alright, we're going to begin researching a toxin. So to begin, we'll read the instructions very carefully. We are going to be using a website called PubChem, which is a website run by NCBI. You'll get to see that in a little bit. It's a very credible source, and it's going to contain a massive amount of information. You're only going to need a small part of that information. So as you're thinking about which toxin to research, I've got a list of toxins that have come up as toxins of interest this year and in prior years. If you click on the links, you'll be taken to an article about that toxin, and that can help get you started with your research. The assignment today, or the assignment for this part of the lesson, involves creating a Google Slides document. So you can go into Google Drive and create a new Google Slides. You're going to title your document Toxin Research Project - your name, so I know who did what. And then for now, we're going to work through what goes on the first slide. So slide 1 has to include the name of the molecule. So your toxin is a molecule, and it's going to have a name. It should be in the PubChem database. If it's not, pick a different molecule. PubChem is going to have an image of the molecular structure, and I'll show you how to find that. You're interested in this toxin for a reason, so presumably you have some insight into how somebody might be exposed to this molecule. If you have no idea how somebody might be exposed to the molecule, do some research or pick a different molecule, maybe something you're a little more familiar with. And then finally, the LD50 for the molecule that you picked, including the species and the route of administration that is most relevant to the route and type of exposure that you selected. So your answer to part 4 is going to inform the LD50 that you select in part 5 here. All right, let's make sense of this. I am somebody who really enjoys spicy foods. Spicy foods don't necessarily like me, and I tend to overestimate my ability to handle the heat when it comes to spicy food. So I'm interested in why it is that food is spicy. And so after a little bit of research, I come across the name of a molecule called capsaicin. Capsaicin, as we're told here on a poison control, so poison.org, a good reference. Capsaicin is the active ingredient in hot peppers that can be intensely irritating on the skin, in the eyes, to the stomach and the gastrointestinal tract, as well as if it's inhaled. So this definitely brightens up your food, but it also can cause some lasting effects on your body, at least in the short term. So capsaicin is the toxin that I'm going to be researching. And so I'm going to open up a new browser, and I'm going to type in PubChem. And there it is, the first hit. PubChem. I'm going to click on that, and in the search box that comes up, you can see that this is it's brought to you by NCBI, which is part of the National Institutes of Health. So this is a very, very powerful database. All right, I'm going to type in the name of the toxin, capsaicin, hit enter. And this database is going to provide me with a whole bunch of information. You can see that you can get overwhelmed pretty fast with what's in here. I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to go with the best compound, or the compound best match. Starts off with the name capsaicin, gives me a whole bunch of other information. Maybe I have no idea what any of this means. I see capsaicin come up a couple different times, and with a different spelling maybe. I'm going to click on this and see where it takes me. Aha, this is the molecule. So this is the PubChem compound summary for capsaicin, and there is so much information in here. We're going to only need a very small part. So according to our instructions, create a Google Slides document. All right, we can do that. Title the document appropriately. All right, that's easy. We're going to put the name. So I'm going to type in the name capsaicin onto my slide, the first slide of my Google slide. I'm going to copy the link that I just found to get to this page. So I'm going to copy that HTML link into my Google slide. Ooh, try that again. Okay. Now I need an image of the molecular structure. Well, guess what? It's right there. I got a bunch of different options. So before I just click on something here, I'm going to pull your attention over to the contents on the right-hand side, table of contents here. There's several, I guess 19 different entries in this contents area. The first one is structures. If I click on that, I can see that this will provide me with the two-dimensional structure, the three-dimensional structure, the crystal structure. I'm going to stick with the two-dimensional structure, and this will bring up something that probably looks pretty familiar to you. Remember, this type of molecular model, it has non-carbons labeled. So here we've got oxygen, oxygen, a nitrogen, another oxygen. Where all these lines come together, wherever we have a point, we just have to know that that means that there's a carbon, and then the lines that are connecting those points represent bonds. So here we've got a carbon double bonded to another carbon. Up here we've got this oxygen with this line going off. That tells us that there's a bond between oxygen and a carbon on the end here. And then we remember from the honk 1, 2, 3, 4 rule that carbon has to make a total of 4 bonds. So like this carbon off on the end here has 1 bond to oxygen. It would have 3 more bonds to hydrogen. So you may need to review how to understand this, although I'm not going to be asking you to tell me how to read this in this part of our work. Anyhow, if I want this image, I'm going to copy this image, right click, copy the image, and then I'll paste it into my Google slide. And now I've got the image of the structure. Alright, so now I have 3 finished off. Number 4, how might somebody be exposed to the molecule? Well, again, I'm interested in capsaicin because I'm interested in spicy foods and why it is that I can only tolerate so much. So I know that I experience capsaicin when I eat or when I ingest spicy foods or spicy peppers. So that's how I would be exposed, or how somebody might be exposed to the molecule. So I'm going to be focusing on LD50s for the molecule that are, ideally I'd find an LD50 for humans that have been exposed to capsaicin where they've eaten it. So that would give me my most relevant data. Unfortunately, that would mean that people would actually have done experiments where humans are fed increasing amounts of capsaicin to the point where they actually die. And so while that research data would be helpful for this project, it would be horrifying if that actually existed. So I'm hoping not to find that data, and instead to find something that was conducted in an animal study where we could apply those results to humans. Okay, so I'm going to go back up into PubChem. I'm going to go to my contents. I'm going to scroll down, and looking through, I'm going to get to the point where it says toxicity. It's often, for most molecules, it's often in around 13. I think I've seen it as low as 11 and sometimes at 14. So, but it's somewhere in this area, depending on how many sections are in the document. So toxicity, and I'm going to be focusing on this first table where it's showing me the LD50s from acute effects. So when I think about eating something spicy, I don't eat spicy foods constantly. I eat them occasionally. So, and as I get older, I eat them less and less often. So I'm going to use the acute effects table. You may see a table with a compound where they have chronic effects, so effects from a molecule where you're exposed to for a much longer period of time. All right, so the route intraperitoneal, that would mean injected into the gut. Oral means fed, so that would be actually very, very relevant. Skin, again, intraperitoneal. Subcutaneous would be injected into the skin. So this second entry looks like the most relevant entry for me. So for my LD50, I'm going to include the organism, which is mouse, and the route, oral. So again, this is an experiment where lab mice were fed increasing amounts of capsaicin, and at some point 50% of the mice actually died. and the amount of capsaicin that it took to reach that LD50 was 47,200 micrograms per kilogram, or equivalently 47.2 milligrams per kilogram. I'm going to use this milligrams per kilogram dose because it's a convenient and familiar unit, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. And that's all I need. That gets me through part 5. So if you actually would like to see what this might look like put together into a slide, I can show you that here. I assembled this a little while ago. So I've got the name of my molecule, capsaicin. I have a link to the PubChem site where I found it, so I can go back. I'm going to need to go back and use this site, so I want to make sure I have that information as a reference. I have a picture of the structure. I have information about how capsaicin is commonly encountered, and the LD50 acute effects. I'm reminding myself that, okay, this is something that if I were to eat enough capsaicin in a short period of time, I could experience a lethal dose. And so in mice that are fed capsaicin, that lethal dose was 47.2 milligrams per kilogram. Slide 1 is done.